Okay, today we will start with a presentation by the Madrid students on the brain on the vat, in the vat. So as usual, we will have this presentation from Madrid, then we will have the basic lecture, and then we will have at 10:30 Central European Time the presentation by Josh Bongard from the University of Vermont. It's becoming kind of tradition for the Shanghai lectures to have Josh waking up in the middle of the East US night for giving his lecture. So he deserves a special thanks because in terms of time zone he is definitely in the worst possible condition. So it looks like in Madrid we are almost ready.
We are ready to start.
Okay, Madrid, go ahead. So now we have this presentation on the brain in the vat from Madrid. As told several times in the previous lectures, any group of students from anywhere wishing to contribute one short presentation on one of the challenges is more than welcome. Just drop me an email, let's say by Tuesday or even by Wednesday before the lecture, and we can adjust it just before we send the program from the day. So Madrid, go ahead.
Good morning, Fabio.
Good morning. Good morning,
Good morning everyone else. Today, as you said, the presentation, we're going to talk about brain in the vat. Okay. In the presentation, we're going to first introduce the various theories as Descartes and Hilary Putnam, and then we're going to talk about the influences of these theories in fiction and real life, and finally we're going to do a comparison between them and conclude with a biological point of view and an engineering point of view. The brain in a vat was a theory that assumes that we are a brain, as the name says, that is not in the real world, but we are being stimulated through diodes or various ways that manipulate the way we see reality without us actually being there.
Okay, so now before talking about the brain in the vat, I'm going to talk about its predecessor by Descartes, which is called Meditations on First Philosophy. So Descartes tells us that there are three types of beliefs, or three types to perceive, three ways of perceiving the information. We can perceive information about the world, mathematics, or myself. So the world can be an optical illusion, and I can be dreaming, but for mathematics to be fake, to be false, an evil demon has to be doing something controlling me. So hypothetically, there could exist an evil demon that controls my perception of reality. So all scientific theories are questionable, like basic mathematical expressions like 2 + 2. So there can only be two possibilities. Either the evil demon is God himself, or God is allowing him to deceive us. If I know that there is a God, he has to be perfect. So he cannot be the evil demon himself. But if he allows the evil demon to deceive me, God is also a deceiver. Therefore, God will not allow the demon to deceive myself. So we can argue that all of our doubts are cast aside. God will not allow him to deceive us.
Well, I'm going to talk about the brain in a vat, an hypothetical scenario used in philosophy and a lot of scientific fields. This experiment tries to show that if our brain is stimulated in the same way as reality does, we cannot tell the difference between what is real or unreal. So the problem is, can we trust our sense? Well, the hypothesis is that we are a brain and bat connected to a computer, and we are receiving electrical impulses from that computer. Those electrical impulses deceive our brain into thinking that we are in a fictional reality. This is a debate that is... If this is possible or not is an open debate between philosophers, and well, there are a lot of arguments in favor or counter-arguments for this proposal. One counter-argument will be what Pullman said, that we cannot be a brain a bed, because if we are brain a bed, all our knowledge is based on that simulation, and we cannot refer to something outside of our real world that will be that simulation. So we cannot conceive a brain in a bat outside it. Well, even if we are in a real world or in a simulated one, for us, it's better to act as we are in a real one, because it's better for our own happiness and the happiness of the one that surrounded us in case that we are in the real world.
One of the main influences was the article written by Alba Noe, Out of Our Heads and Why You Are Not Your Brain. In this article, he states a brain in a bat would not be conscious. The world is not a construction of the brain, nor is it a product of our unconscious efforts. Noe raises the point of how can we believe the idea of that consciousness depends only on what happens in our brain. He backs his argument with the fact that we spend our lives embodied in the world and environment around us. Then in fiction we can also find a lot of reference, such as movies like Matrix and Transcendence. And then about this argument bringing the bat, we can have different point of views. From a biology point of view, is that the brain in the bat experiment derives from idea that the brain in the bat is not and cannot be biologically similar to that of an embodied brain. Since the brain in the bat is disembodied, it follows that it does not have a similar biology to that of an embodied brain. The brain in the bat lacks the connections from the body to the brain, which renders the brain in the bat neither anatomically nor neurophysiologically similar to that of an embodied brain. If this is the case, we cannot say that it is even possible for the brain in the bat to have similar experience to the embodied brain, since the brains are not equal. From an engineering point of view, it would be now in the present and in the near future practically impossible to be a hardware enough and possible to simulate the real world. Therefore, we conclude that now in the near future, the brain in the bat would not be possible. If you have any questions about anything, it's the time. Now is the time.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Very nice. I like the cartoon on the cartoon in the bat because I think it's a very good idea. So, any question from the other students? So, I think this cartoon is delightful. Okay. Any question from students? From students to students? Any comment? Maybe someone disagree. You know that very recently there was some in the news. There was that Elon Musk, the very active entrepreneur and CEO of of Tesla and SpaceX and previously PayPal actually told in public that he thinks we live in a simulation, which of course he likes paradoxes, but and actually there is a small research project in the US by a couple of researchers to try to understand how I can understand if I am in a simulation or not. Because in principle, there are, you may know, there are many different, very strange ideas on the origin of the world. So there is one that thinks that the world is on top of a giant god turtle, and then there is another animal, and then there is the world where we live. But from a scientific standpoint, I can. So this idea of living in a simulation is just one more idea, strange idea about the world. But the question it could be about how I can observe if I am in a simulation or not. What allows me to distinguish if I'm living a simulation or not? Apart from the probability, because it could be extremely unlikely that someone built such a big simulator. But I don't know. So I would like, so no students there to make comments or raise questions on this. So Madrid, because I don't want this seems an interrogation. So Madrid. So your idea finally is that it's not possible. You don't think that this idea is a good idea because it's too complex to implement, or because you think there is something more based on principle?
Well, we think that now the technology we have is very complex to achieve what the function of all the functions of the brain, because the brain is very complex, and I don't know, I'm not sure, but I don't know if we completely know everything about the brain. So first we will have to know everything, every aspect of how the brain works, and then try to simulate it. But now I think it is not possible.
Nevertheless, it's not possible to know if we are or not right now in a simulated environment, such as the SpaceX and Tesla CEO said.
So you think we may live in a simulation?
There could be
actually, I think that it might be. This is just one more opinion, but we, in general, this simulation should be on the one side be as complex as the world. So we should simulate the world with another world, a universe with at least a significant part of the universe itself. So it could be very difficult, because, but there might be escape for this way of reasoning, saying yes, but you may fool the brain, because the brain should be less. I'm not sure about that, but should be less complex than the real universe, or at least less complex of the part of the universe that we can more or less experience. So we may say yes, but I may just send fake signals and fool completely the brain, like it happens in dreams. But then, to a certain extent, we understand if we are dreaming or if we are awake. So there are, when I say it's just an opinion, it's because we still know too little about this kind of things. What I could say is that this simulation of the world should be an autonomous world, so it should be something which is, if you want, is another world. So something which simulated the law of physics, at least a significant part of law of physics, So at the end, it would be another world. And so at this point, it's really very philosophical to understand what it means as a world or not a world. And there are physicists here and that don't want to enter into the issues like parallel universes and things like that. But we really, we live in an age where we tend to be very optimistic about what we know about the universe. We still don't understand a lot of things. For instance, for sure, consciousness is a completely black hole, so it's very difficult to say what I can perceive if I don't have an idea who I am in terms of which characteristic a physical system should have to be conscious. But we are living a worse condition, so I'm not even still able, but here much more optimistic, to build a system intelligent like a spider or an ant. This could be the task for the next 10 to 20 years. So this could be feasible. And then, no, it's a very tricky question. So, and of course, we don't still have an answer on this. The idea is that the simulation should be a simulation which is by itself a kind of small world, so something which follows some rules. And then we should engineer the connections in such a way that the brain learns from this simulated world. So anyway, thank you. Very nice presentation. I don't know if you have a final comment.
Just to say thank you for giving us the time to talk about this subject.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You should release the screen sharing. A couple of minutes and then we... Okay, now we will go until 10:15 with the basic thread lectures. So again, any group of students wishing to give a short presentation like this is more welcome. Also, stupid questions on other students or lecturer presentations are more welcome, because there are basically no stupid questions, because even in particular on this kind of issues, there are a lot of stupid questions in the literature read by respected philosophers and scientists. So one more would not change the picture. So today we continue as told until 10:15. So a little bit less than half an hour on the so-called basic thread. So the part of the lectures which is more tightly related to how the body shapes everything. And today we are going to talk to some of the tricky issues. And so we will try to give a meaning to this kind of buzzword, like morphological computation, self-organization of behaviors, and adaptive morphology. Of course, it's unlikely that in half an hour or even in the whole lectures we are able to really dig completely into this. But the idea is that for the basic, from the lectures and the guest lectures, you should have an idea of which are the challenges, and you have some direction for studying yourself. And also, by participating in the koans, you should test if really you understood or not what we are talking about. We just a super fast recap. So where are the issues now with AI? The issues are with understanding our behavior and in general animal and plant behaviors. So natural form intelligence, and this issue of interaction with the real world, where actually the vat paradox is very important. No? Because if you may have noticed what I say, because I don't completely dismiss the idea that we live in a simulation, but I say this simulation is actually the simulation of the world. And at this point, the issue is, but how you distinguish a real world from a simulated world if it is autonomous from yourself, and if your understanding and perception and connection of this world emerges naturally from your brain. So it could be even... I think so. Someone proposed that that the universe itself is a kind of giant simulator. So it's typical of philosophical issues to have a problem with words and the usage of words. So that's why actually engineering and science and technology are probably easy compared to other easy, at least more grounded and shared. No. And so we have seen that the real issue is the complete agent. So the point of view of the embodied AI community is that intelligence only exists in a body. Then this body could be a simulated body in a simulated world. But I need a world and I need a body. And intelligence emerges from the interaction with this world. So subject to the law of physics, we are again to the simulation issue. No? So this law of physics can be the real law of physics, or can be the simulated law of physics. And I think in this global, all there are people knowing how also this concept of law of physics could also depend on other deeper laws that we don't access directly. And so generation, and the example that we discussed was these puppy examples. No? So the idea is that I have a controller, which is just a kind of higher level, and then a lot of my interaction with environment is mediated by the body and the sensory system, and so I'm deeply dependent from my environment. A big issue here is how to quantify this kind of things. We are at the beginning of this kind of stuff. And we have seen last time the approach of evolutionary robotics, and we will see more in today's guest lecture by Josh Bongard. Because the issue which actually hampers this approach is the symbol grounding or symbol anchoring issue. This video that and so we have we may have a look at this picture where we have a different kind of robots and also a human walking. So in the part below, I have Curio and Asimov, which are examples of it's a joke, good old-fashioned robotics, meaning that they are pieces of steel governed by electric motors and fully actuated, which means that if I wanted to manage this trajectory at any point, I calculate the torque that I need to give to this, or the current, but in principle the torque that I need to give to this to any joint to achieve the trajectory that I want. And this is true for Curio, it's true for Asimov, it's true for now, it's true for Pepper, it's true for many applications. And then we are more research implementation, like the others, like the Delft biped, the first on the left. Then we have the MIT biped, and in the middle we have the Cornell Ranger. So these are all of that are examples of so-called passive worker. What's the characteristic of a passive worker with respect to a fully actuated worker? And we also have a human in the corner, no? In the right upper corner, or upper left corner from your view. What's relevant here is that the power for doing the same, working the same piece, the same distance with the same speed, the fully actuated robots use 20 to 30 times more energy than the passive workers and the human worker. And the Cornell Ranger is significant because it's a kind of marathon, as a kind of marathon, robot marathon record, because it was able to walk for 64 kilometers with a battery charge. This is kind of science fiction in comparison to the other one. What's the problem? The problem is that this kind of, this is the probably the most answered example of this kind of passive worker. No? The problem is that also if you look at them, I don't try to show you the video because I'm not so confident on our infrastructure, but you may check it or find it on the internet and look by yourself. The point is that this system was able to work at the same speed for 60 and something kilometers. What's the problem with this system? The problem with this system is that it is a single speed. So if you want to change the speed, so it's an exaggeration because you may use some trick and do some, for instance, if you look carefully at the picture of this robot, you will see that there are weights. And those weights can be used, for instance, to take a turn. So if you wanted to turn, you can change direction, but in a very difficult way. Hi, Josh. And in contrast, you have this approach, the other approach. So, if you wanted to compare these two approaches, because the obvious question is, so why doesn't everybody implement just passive workers? No? Because I mean, let's think that people designing Curio or Asimov were wrong. Then they discover that passive workers exist, and they stop doing mistakes and they build new. The problem is that putting it in a very paradoxical and extreme way, if I want to change the speed of a passive worker, I should change the robot. So I should change the morphology of a robot because sorry, now I miss it. Basically, a passive worker is an inverted pendulum. So if I want to change, and the gate is related to the period of oscillation of a pendulum. of course, how I can change the period of oscillation of a pendulum, if not by changing the length of the string. So the problem with this kind of passive work, which is basically still not implemented, I would say, in a working system, is that I need to develop a control approach which is different from the approach that I use when the morphology is fixed. Typical approaches to control of those kind of system are, for instance, evolutionary to evolve the control. And then I have other issues because one thing is to build a fixed geometry robot. Another thing with current technology is to build a robot that can change. If we are not in simulation, it's difficult to build a robot that can really change the configuration. But that is probably the way to go. And this also applies to because we tend, a typical mistake that we may be led to do is to confuse, so to see the world as it was like us, no? Anthropocentrism, anthropocentrism is a typical issue, no? Because, for instance, we think to our eyes, but in nature there are very different kind of eyes. And to a certain extent, you may check Barbara Mazzolai's lectures of a couple of years ago, or on some book on the topic. There is a field which is called neurophysiology, or botanics neurophysiology, or things like that. Meaning that also plants in some way can see, because different leaves are in different positions and receive, of course it's not what we consider as sight, but it's a kind of sight because it's a way to see the distribution of lights in your neighbors. They also can hear, in the sense that they have many leaves and they can detect and integrate the different vibration of the different leaves, which is for us extremely exotic. So it's kind of, because we have a lot of science fiction movie about aliens, but we have a lot of aliens here. Plants, for instance, have a kind of intelligence, so to speak, which is completely very different from what we have. And also, if you look at eyes, we typically have this retina, and we have this ball, and we have this dark chamber projecting on the retina. And this is a way. But other ways are typical of insects are like this, so to have many small eyes distributed according to a specific plan, and they use this to move. No, this is now a 15 years old work, but still more. So the approach to navigation, because again, we talked about walking, but also we may talk about navigation. So navigation, I can think of really analyzing all what they do in SLAM systems. So I reconstruct the map of the environment. I understand by a statistical iteration, a probabilistic iteration, where I am in this environment from laser scans of my vision, and then I decide a path. This, if you think about, is very similar to the approach of fully controlled working robots. The approach that used in nature, for example, by insects, so I don't want to say that everybody, is to really have a kind of flow. So they regulate, they see what they have on the border of a field view and in front, and they just adapt to the speed, to the flow of the images, which is completely different. So they don't reconstruct at all. And this is in terms of the computing system complexity, because finally you have to compute if you want to move. it's much cheaper. So actually, I use the morphology of AI and the morphology of the environment because it won't work everywhere. Because I need to have an alternance of dark and whiter areas to be able to do this kind of evaluations. And they need at least to feel known statistics. So it will work in the bees, in a bees world. It may not work on Titan or in another environment, but it works, and it is much cheaper than the standard SLAM. So bees don't use SLAM to navigate in the environment, and they do it extremely well. This is something, it's not a way to dismiss SLAM research, but it's a way to say, so there is something that we may exploit. As I told you, there is a large community which is actually trying to follow this kind of deep bio-inspired approach, to really reverse engineer the principle of organization like this, like we have seen in passive walking or in navigation of bees, and try to build robots. As you may have understood from what I said before, the big problem that I have is to change the morphology online. This is a big problem. This requires new materials. And also to build an insect eye is not that, it's maybe more feasible. There is an example. I think we had also this guest lecture maybe last year or 2 years ago. It's also possible to build, so this kind of eyes, sorry for this terrible, is actually being implemented by EPFL in the group of Dario Floreano. So something like this, by microchips. So another approach, photovoltaic, but basically the approach is the same, and it works. Of course, you understand where we are, because we have the passive walker that can turn with some difficulty, but cannot change speed, and typically don't have a couple of arms of my passive walker. On the other hand, I have the insect eye, but it's alone. So we have a lot of specific results that need to be integrated. And another example is grasping. Those of you who are involved in some robotics PhD know that the typical approach is, again, if you think about it, it's always the same. Is I have this fully actuated arm, I have this camera or stereo camera or time of flight camera, which is able to reconstruct my environment. And the idea is that I reconstruct the details, the map of environment in front of my camera and my robot. Then I decide where my robot has to go, and I fully actuate my arm. At this point, when I am close to the object, for instance this one, I calculate the points. There is a lot of research on which the minimum number of points that I need to touch with my finger and where. And then by this trajectory, I calculate my fully actuated finger trajectory. And this is I would say, the mainstream or what I call with a joke, of course, good old-fashioned paradigm on grasping. And then there is the way that I grasp objects. I did already this example, but which is basically very similar to the passive walking approach, because more or less I see there is something here, something that I can grasp, and I know it already. At this point, I move this following one of the natural movement trajectory allowed by my shoulders, so by my morphology. When I am more or less here, more or less, because Terminators, you may remember, calculate everything. but I don't. When I am here, I let this fall, basically, the very same way I work. And then it falls when I am close enough, but I don't know exactly where. I'm not conscious, but also my brain doesn't know exactly where. And then I close. And when I close, because more or less my hand is done for this purpose, so it's soft, and I have a number of grasp that I can implement, given again the way the fingers are attached to the palm. So again, morphology. And here we have this example that I just show you in picture. But again, you can find it, and I will give you the presentation. And we have this example. So before, since I promised to finish at 10:15, we have a number of issues here, which because you may say, so what, right? Because okay, very interesting, but then you understand that I have this possibility of having a worker which consumes 20 times less than the standard technology, when a typical problem with robots is autonomy. When I can do the same thing with the arm, when I can navigate properly without doing a lot of calculation, this is a very interesting technological opportunity. As told, the issue is that I should develop ways to do that. But if I succeed in developing these approaches to do that, it means robots much more flexible and dexterous and adaptive, consuming a fraction of energy. So it means robots really able to do something. As I told you, we have two problems, models and materials. Because the paradigm is already there, and I think it's was already well presented in this book that we use as a textbook. So memory for working, what's the meaning here? Because the idea is where we talked about the fact that when we discussed about ontogenesis, so development and evolution. So something is for sure, I'm not sure what exactly is being written into the brain, basic brain morphology, but I didn't start. If you look at the development of a baby, you don't see the baby waiting to have the full arm and then start to experiment with the arm. Actually, the control of the arm co-evolved with the development of the baby. And as told, the baby is several billions years old, because all our body morphologies and control systems are several billion years old. So, but this co-development raises an issue. So where I have the memory, for instance, if you can ride by a bicycle, you will be able to ride a bicycle forever, even if you don't ride it for many years. Where is it written, right? In the case of walking, in part, if you think to the example of the grasping, is written in the body. So a typical characteristic of natural system is that they have a part, so the memory of a passive worker is in the structure of a passive worker. If you move from a passive worker to a human worker, and if you look at how passive worker work, you see that it's much more natural than the way of in other robots to work. Is that the memory is in the structure. So, and if you think again to the development of a baby, part of the knowledge on walking and interacting with the world of a baby has evolved with the body of a baby. So it's not by chance that we have this long development process. So it is useful to, it's part of a learning process. And then since it's late, I just, so this idea, by the way, has been rediscovered, if you want, discovered in the robotics and AI community quite recently, but this idea of active perception actually traces back to John Dewey, which was a famous American psychologist of the 19th century, of the end of the 19th century, and it already was said what we are saying now. So actually, what my perception emerges from the interaction with the world, and it's not retouched by maybe already this idea of a frame of reference and the issue of symbolic representation. So it's it could be still a bit controversial, but for sure we have some kind of compact representation, and for sure culturally we have developed the concept of symbol, and we say this is an iPhone, no? The symbol of an iPhone. But this is a really high-level layer that is built to something else, which actually is regularities in the interaction, in the sensory motors, because it's not because you may think of regularities in the vision, in what I see in the world or what I smell in the world. No, it's regularity in what happens when I move it. We were talking about the brain of the bat, in the bat. So the idea is that so I believe this is real, because when I touch it, could be a very sophisticated simulation of something which is indistinguishable from a real world. But okay, this is real, because if I do something, I have. And what really exists here is probably the basic of what is here is the structure of this interaction. So I can work on this planet in this range of temperature, in this range of humidity, and with this macroscopic laws of physics that I know, but my brain wouldn't work in a completely different environment. And this is true for most natural. There are ways to try to measure this kind of thing, and again, we are at the beginning of this kind of studies, but honestly I'm confident that after that you have the right principles when it's a kind of mathematical symbol crunching, and to develop the right methods. Typically, there is this nice work by Lungarelle's Pons by about 10 years ago on how we can measure the integration between sensors and motors. No? So between the actuation and what I sense. There are ways to do that, and typically they are in the field, they can be imported from the information theory, the communication theory of communication. So information theory properly defined, so not software engineering, but really the principle of information, how information pass through the channel, and at some point I can see the world between my eyes and my actuator as an information channel, and basically connecting myself with myself and allowing this emerge. Of course, if you are interested, you can check. The idea is that we have some mathematical tools that we can use. And what is interesting in this study that I'm quoting is that actually we were able, in this setting, and in a number of similar settings, with a learning system that was based in good old-fashioned neural networks. So, but it could probably work with any system with learning capabilities doing the same things. When the system started to behave properly, as seen by a human observer, the transfer entropy, so something which is built on mutual information, so a more complicated and sophisticated way of saying mutual information means that, again, qualitatively is how much this signal is related to this signal and to this signal as a peak. So actually, this suggests that the maximization of some metrics built on mutual information, for instance, transfer entropy or complexity or whatever, actually could drive the evolution of natural intelligence. But this is one of the examples. And then there is this nice snakebot, which is an example that I like a lot because it's a very simple system made of balls, loosely connected, which has a control which basically only maximizes the mutual information in between sensing and actuation. And the result is something which moves very, very close, with a very natural way, very similar to a snake. Then there are other issues that we can discuss, because if you look at some work, for instance, by Tamar Flaksh, and also something that I did in the past recently, is so it's not given, because we are from the school, we learn the Euclidean geometry, but there are not many hints that our brain really uses an Euclidean geometry when analyzing the world. This is, again, there is a lecture by Tamar Flaksh which actually shows some example on scribbling. No? So you may look at which functions are optimized by the brain when I scribble. So I write randomly on a piece of paper. It's interesting to see that it used 3 or 4 different non-Euclidean geometry, probably choosing the fittest one depending on the moment. So something really different from what. And this is an attempt to design the control of this puppy robot. So this robot which works on the treadmill like a real puppy without having any control, in terms of attractors in the chaotic dynamics of a structure. Again, you see chaos theory and nonlinear dynamics are all fields that exist, and they have already well-developed methods. What so far only a few people like our friend Fumiya have done is to apply them to robotics, because this is a really an alternative way to approach robotics. So if you want, it's a kind of radical stance of robotics, meaning that we really try to to understand the principle of natural intelligent organisms and to use them to build robots which are soft but also rigid, but they have very distinctive characteristics is that they are self-organizing, they have emergent behaviors. So it's the beginning, but it's an interesting challenge, set of challenges to cope with. So thank you. So I don't know if you have questions. If you have questions or comments. So if you don't have we may have a few minutes break where we try to to check if everything is okay with Josh, and then we can start Josh lecture. So 5 minutes. And prepare some cool question for Josh.
Good morning, Fabio. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Nice to see you. Yeah,
nice to see you too.
At this point, it's a kind of tradition having you in the dark nights of Vermont.
That's right. We're also having a very strong...
Now Vermont is very famous because you almost had a president from Vermont.
That's true. That's right. Now everybody knows about Vermont. Exactly. That's right.
So before we knew for you, and now we have 2 famous people from Vermont.
That's right. That's right. Very good. Okay.
You should, from Adobe, try to share your screen.
Okay.
You should have this share my screen. Exactly. And of course you.
Then I will minimize everything here.
Into this issue because I think at this point everybody would have preferred the guy from Vermont, even you from your.
even me.
Anyone from Vermont.
That's right, exactly. Very good.
So perfect. It seems that everything is okay.
Okay. Great.
No, we can just wait a couple of minutes.
Sure, no problem.
So how are things going there, apart from politics?
Aside from the politics, yeah, very, very good. A lot of interesting research here in the group, which I'll talk about today, and I think I'm going to focus on our recent soft robotics work.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I know that you have a visit from Pisa.
That's correct. That's right. We had a very distinguished visiting academic who's now returned to Pisa.
Yeah, I know.
Are you at the same institute as Francesco?
Yes, it's the same institute. Actually, Cecilia is next door.
I see. Okay, very good.
We are. There is a small courtyard, and we have windows on which side.
I see. Okay. It's a very small world.
It's a very small world. Yes.
That's right. That's right.
I used to compare robotics community to a town of some 10,000 people. So more or less you know everybody.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Not tightly, but you met them at some meeting. And
That's right. That's right. Very good. And how's everything going with you?
Oh, very well. No, we are doing interesting stuff. Also, we are even trying to do some application of soft robotics to the industrial setting. Even.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
So basically using good old-fashioned robots, but putting soft hands, giving some touch things. But it's an research, I will tell you. Maybe it won't work, but...
Well, it's worth trying.
We are trying, exactly.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Very good.
Kind of evolutionary approach to move soft robotics method into a mainstream, because now there is this industrial world where they believe in the industrial robots.
Right.
So the idea, let's start to put some skin, some soft actuator, and let's try to see what happens. So this is
sure.
And then this strange, I'm still losing my time with this strange mathematical modeling issues.
Okay. Oh, great.
Good. So thank you, everybody. No, I think that now it's a kind of, for you, it's a kind of personal challenge to stay this time. So it's already 4.
I had some practice doing this, so that's okay. It's traditional now.
It's traditional. Every time,
That's
the
right.
first time you say, no, I can't, everybody will be a bit disappointed. And
That's right.
Say,
No, that hasn't happened yet. Not yet.
Okay. 1 minute.
Sure.
So maybe.
And I have until, is it 5 a.m. my time?
Yes.
11 a.m.?
Yeah. 5, let's say 10 past 5.
Okay.
The problem is with the Japanese and the Tasmanian people from Tasmania, but for them it's becoming late, but nobody is in the condition to complain with you, I would say.
That's right. That's right. Somehow the local optima. I have the global optimum here.
Exactly. So so this is, so I think we can start. So this is Josh Bongat, Professor Bongat from the University of Vermont in the US, from his own home, I think.
That's right.
Actually, the co-author of the book that we use, the textbook, so together with Rolf Pfeiffer, and is doing a lot of research on. I think I showed you the evolving morphology research that they did some time ago, and today we talk about his new research on soft robotics. But you will see it's very much in line, and it couldn't be different because he's one of the maximum ideologists of this Symbolic AI community. It is very much in line with what we said. So, Josh, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much, Fabio, and thanks to all of you for joining today. Can all of the groups hear me okay?
I do.
Yes, okay. I think so. Great. Well, again, thank you for the invitation. So, as Fabio said, I'm going to speak a little bit today about soft robotics, which I think is it's a very hot topic in robotics at the moment, and it's a good natural application for a lot of the embodied cognition and evolutionary approaches that we find in new artificial intelligence. So, what I'm going to do over the next half hour or so is walk you through what we kind of call, in a tongue-in-cheek way, Evo, Devo, Soro. So, in essence, we're going to look at soft robotics that have been evolved, but not only are these soft robots evolved, but they also change their morphological properties over their lifetime, or they develop. So let's start with Robo. Most of you are probably familiar with the DARPA Robotics Grand Challenge from a few years ago. There were a lot of successes, but also a lot of notable failures. And again, not to pick on my DARPA and other roboticist colleagues, but there is a particular challenge in developing high mechanical degree of freedom robots. So we now have drones, autonomous cars are coming, very sophisticated machines, but both drones and autonomous cars have relatively few mechanical degrees of freedom. If we want to create mechanically complex robots, this seems to be a very non-intuitive design challenge for humans. So I work in the field of evolutionary robotics, where instead of trying to design the morphology and control by hand, we hand over either the morphology and control or one of the two to evolution. So I'm not sure if you can see the video okay. Is it possible to see the movement of the robots in the video?
It was.
Okay, great. So what you're watching in this left-hand video then is a snapshot from an older experiment we did, but I think demonstrates the idea of evolutionary robotics. This is a relatively straightforward idea. We create a 3D virtual environment, create a population of machines, and then we hand over to the computer a fitness function, and the computer uses that fitness function to measure the fitness or the quality of each individual robot in the population. In this case, we're trying to evolve locomotion, You can see that some of the robots get involved in a traffic jam and stop moving. And there are 2 of them here at the top that are moving at a slightly higher velocity than the other 14 robots in the population. So at the end of each generation, the fitness function is applied, and robots that have low fitness are deleted from the population. And the 1 or 2 robots in this case that survived with higher fitness are copied, and when they're copied, random perturbations are introduced, which simulates mutation. Sometimes we combine genetic material from 2 robots to simulate sexual recombination, and repeat these generations over and over again in simulation. And then if we are able to evolve a robot that has sufficiently interesting morphology or control or behavior, then we go to the extra effort of trying to manufacture a physical version of one of these robots. So again, these 2 videos, as you can see from the captions, are taken from 2 different experiments, but I like to show them side by side just to give you the basic idea of how most evolutionary robotics experiments proceed, which is evolve populations of robots in simulation and then try and transfer one of the evolved robots from simulation to reality. One of the major challenges with evolutionary robotics has become known as the reality gap problem, which is obviously any simulation is not going to be a full representation of reality. So often evolution will exploit approximations or inaccuracies in the physics of the simulation, so that if you take a robot from simulation to reality, it does not transfer well, and we don't get the behavior in reality that we saw in simulation. But given the small amount of time we have today, I'm not going to focus on the reality gap problem. I'm going to focus on a different challenge, which is really, I think, where evolutionary approaches shine, which is allowing an evolutionary system to design not just the controller of a robot, but also its morphology. Some of you may be familiar with the work of Carl Sims. This was a historical landmark in our field. This was some amazing work done way back in the early 1990s. Very sophisticated at the time, and still sort of the state of the art in terms of evolving both morphology and control. As Fabio just mentioned, and I'm sure you've heard throughout this course, it's very challenging to try and get morphology and control to work well together. We want to find a balance between morphology and control. And again, this is often something that is difficult to do by hand. So in evolutionary robotics, we try and automate this process by allowing evolution to improve both body plan and control. Since 1994, a number of other researchers have replicated and tried to build upon Carl Sims' original work, myself included. So just as an example of some more recent work in this area, this is some work by one of my PhD students, Josh Auerbach, who wanted to look at not just morphology and control, but also the relationship between morphology, control, and environment. So in this case, Josh was evolving morphologies and control, as you can see here, in a relatively simple environment. So an infinitely flat horizontal plane. And he got morphologies that were relatively simple. When those simple morphologies were transferred to a slightly more complex environment, like you can see on the video now on the right, these robots no longer did very well because they're no longer operating in their ecological niche. So Fabio was just speaking about this issue of ecological niche. So in this case, we now restarted evolution in this more complex environment, and we obtained robots that had slightly more complex morphologies. So you can see now we have robots with morphologies that have more complex appendages, where they can get down into the cracks of these obstacles and pull or push themselves forward. So this, again, is an example of how evolution can find balances in the interactions between morphology, control, and environment. In this particular experiment, what Josh Auerbach found is that when we evolve in more complex morphologies, when we evolve in more complex environments, evolution often finds morphologies that are just complex enough to succeed in those environments. Okay. So again, that's just an example of evolution where we're evolving both morphology and control. So I want to switch now from evo-robo, evolutionary robotics, to SORO, or soft robotics. I'd like to start with, again, some of the first work in this area. What you're watching on the right, in the right video here, is a soft robot developed by George Whitesides and his colleagues at Harvard University. This uses pneumatic actuation to expand and contract the volumes of small compartments inside this robot. We created a simulation of this robot a couple years ago. So that's soft robotics. And again, soft robotics, trying to create the right morphology for a soft robot is even more, in many cases, is even less intuitive than designing by hand the morphology of a rigid robot. So it's exactly in those non-intuitive design spaces where evolutionary methods often are superior to other optimization methods. So that's soft robotics. Before we move into the evolution of soft robotics, we need a simulation in order to allow evolution to design, to explore the space of possible options. So much of the work in evolving soft robotics uses as a base layer a simulation called VoxCAD. VoxCAD was developed by John Hiller, a graduate student of Hod Lipson back at Cornell. This is a video showing someone manually designing a morphology in VoxCAD. VoxCAD is based on the idea that every robot is made up of a number of voxels, which are three-dimensional pixels, and those voxels can have different material properties. So you'll notice in this video here there are voxels that have 4 different colors. The green and the red voxels you can think of as muscle. They're going to actuate using a sinusoidal actuation pattern. The red voxels will actuate in antiphase to the green voxels, which you'll see in a moment when they start up the simulation. So by having these 2 antagonistic muscle groups, you can already start to get some interesting locomotion patterns. The dark blue voxels that you see are rigid voxels, so this is something like bone, and the light blue voxels are passive and soft material, so there's something like fat in a biological system. You can see the URL there, so you can download VoxCAD and try it out yourself. But again, that's someone manually designing the morphology of a soft robot. How do we apply an evolutionary method to VoxCAD to allow evolution to design robot bodies? Well, I'm going to introduce you to some work that does that, but before I introduce you to that work, I want to talk about a particular evolutionary system. These are compositional pattern producing networks, or CPPNs. These were developed a number of years ago by Ken Stanley. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about how CPPNs work, and then I'll tell you about how CPPNs can design the bodies of soft robots. So CPPN takes a 2-dimensional space or a 3-dimensional space, and I'll show you an example using a 2-dimensional space. Like the space you see on the right-hand side here. We then visit each local position in this space. So we visit each pixel, in this case, in this pixel array. We take the X and Y coordinates of that pixel. We supply it at the input layer of a CPPN. We propagate those 2 signals to the output neuron of a CPPN, and in this case we're going to treat the output neuron as dictating the darkness of that pixel. So we then do that once, we paint that pixel, we move to the next pixel, we input the position of that pixel, we propagate through the network, we get the new grayscale or darkness value, paint that pixel, and continue. And using this example CPPN here, which basically just darkens a pixel proportional to the X coordinate of the pixel, we get a gradient. So let's move on to a second CPPN. So in this case, we add an additional neuron between the X coordinate and the output neuron. And again, if we now visit each pixel and paint that pixel, we get a different pattern across this two-dimensional space. If we evolve CPPNs and we allow the structure of these CPPNs to be changed by evolution, we can get increasingly interesting patterns across the space that we're trying to paint. We can paint grayscale values onto pixels, or in the case of our soft robotics, soft robots, we can take CPPNs, and now we can try and paint three-dimensional voxels inside a 3D bounding space. So we're now going to use CPPNs to evolve the bodies of soft robots. How does that work? We take this 3D bounding box, we visit each position in this three-dimensional space, we take the X, Y, and Z position of that voxel, as well as D, which is the distance from the center. We pass that through our CPPN, and we now force CPPNs to have two output neurons. The first output neuron we reduce to a binary value, which indicates whether a voxel should be placed at that position or not. And we reduce the second output neuron to an integer in the range 0, 1, 2, and 3. So basically we're either putting a voxel at that position or not, and then dictating the particular type of that voxel. As I was telling you before, we have red and green voxels, which correspond to two different muscle groups that actuate in opposition to one another, skeletal structure, which is dark blue, and passive soft material like the light blue voxels that you see here. So this particular method that I've just described to you was reported by Nick Cheney and his colleagues, again from Hod Lipson's group at Cornell. And I'll show you a video now of some of the soft robots that they were able to evolve. In this case, we're only dealing with open loop control, so the soft robots themselves do not have a neural network controller. What you're watching in this video is snapshots of the best robot in the population as evolution proceeds, and it gives you a little bit of an intuition for what the design space for these kinds of robots look like. You'll notice that most of these robots are made up of red and green voxels, which makes sense because if the fitness function is simply locomotion, it makes sense to basically evolve bundles of muscle. If we evolve these robots in more complex environments, we get more interesting geometries and more complex admixtures of muscle, skeleton, muscle, bone, and fat. The image that you can see on the right, this is an attempt, was an early attempt to try and make a physical version of one of these soft robots. So what you're looking at here is a number of styrofoam cubes. The white cubes are solid, and the red cubes have a small hollow core inside. And this entire robot is placed inside of a vacuum chamber. So in the vacuum chamber, Cheney and his colleagues could change the internal air pressure of the chamber, and by reducing the pressure in the tank, the air inside the hollow voxels would expand, and when pressure was reduced, when pressure was reduced, the voxels would grow in size. When pressure is increased inside the tank, the voxels would decrease. So this is a way of sort of simulating in physical robots these voxelized robots. So again, there are efforts underway to try and cross the reality gap between simulated and physical soft robots, and that's still work that's in progress, and I'm not going to talk about the reality gap further today. Okay, so that was some of the initial work on evolving soft robots. The year after that, again, Nick Cheney and his colleagues introduced a new approach where now they have a pacemaker cell. So this is not unlike pacemaker cells in your heart. So we have one voxel which is emitting a regular pattern, and that electrical impulse can be picked up and propagated by other voxels. Or you can have insulating voxels, which you'll see in a moment, which block the propagation of electrical signals. So again, we can get complex movement patterns inside a soft robot simply by evolving the morphology and the material properties of these soft robots. So again, what you're watching now in this video is a number of snapshots of robots from an evolutionary run. You can see the 3D geometry of the soft robot. You can see the propagation of electrical signals through these robots, and also you can see the distribution of different electrical properties of these voxels, and you get interesting locomotion patterns. Okay, let's keep going. Again, this is a third paper by Nick Cheney and his colleagues. One of the questions that often gets asked in robotics is what can you do with soft robots that is difficult or impossible to do with rigid robots. Here's one example, which is soft robots obviously admit the ability to greatly deform their body plans. And in this case, Nick was demonstrating robots that can move through very small apertures. Not unlike this particular soft animal, which is also able to move through very small apertures. So if we want to deploy robots in disaster sites, or someday we want to deploy micro soft robots in blood vessels, it's going to be important for these robots to be able to navigate through very complex environments, including the ability to move through small apertures. Okay. Okay, so that is that's Evo Soro, evolving soft robots. Let me switch now to Evo Devo. This is an idea that Rolf and I talked about in our book, which is introducing change at an intermediate time scale. So in evolution or evolutionary robotics, we have change to body plan and the nervous system or control over phylogenetic time. But for any one individual, that individual also can experience radical changes in morphology and neural control over its lifetime, which is this intermediate time scale, or DEVO. And then finally, of course, when an animal or a robot moves about its environment, it is also deforming its morphology as it moves and behaves. So Evo Devo is short for the evolution of development, which is a recognition that evolution is not directly setting the body plan of an animal or robot. Instead, evolution is setting in motion a system that changes over time. So that's Evo Devo. I'm going to finish today by showing you some very recent work where we apply this idea of the evolution of development to soft robots, which gives us the tongue twister Evo Devo Soro. So how does this work? Well, again, I'm going to show you the evolution of soft robots. So we've got our voxels here, which can change their local volumes. And I'm going to start by showing you, again, Evo Soro. So what you're watching here is a robot that was evolved to move. This is work by now Sam Kriegman, one of my graduate students. And unlike Nick Cheney's work, where we were evolving the 3D geometry and the different material properties of the voxels, in Sam's work, he starts by evolving the initial volumetric deformation, or the size, if you like, of the voxels. So if you look carefully at this bundle of muscle here, you'll see that some of these voxels are partially contracted. And by doing that and then turning on the robot and allowing these voxels to actuate around their initial volume, you get locomotion. So again, that's Evo Soro. So in this case, the CPPNs are evolving the initial volumes of each voxel in this robot and then assessing the fitness of the robot. Now I'm going to show you Evo Devo, which is now the CPPN is going to paint onto the voxels not their initial volume, but how their volumes should change over their lifetime. So I'm going to start up this video on the lower left here, and what you're going to see here is I've turned off the actuation of the robot, and what you're watching is simply how this robot grows over time. So the blue voxels are going to gradually contract over the lifetime of the robot, and the red voxels are going to gradually expand over the lifetime of the robot. So what you were just watching in that video is the developmental trajectory. So how the robot changes over its lifetime, and this evolutionary trajectory, or this developmental trajectory was evolved. Now I'm going to put these two pieces together. So again, you're going to see the developmental trajectory of this robot, but I'm going to turn actuation back on. So while these voxels are slowly changing their size over their lifetime, we add to that the fast time scale, the actuation, and we get robots that both develop over their lifetime and are able to behave. So these four videos together are now demonstrating how these robots are changing over the three time scales. We're evolving this developmental trajectory and allowing the robots to move as they go. What you just watched, however, was development which just unfolds over its lifetime. The last experiment that I'm going to show you is now development, or how the voxels change over the robot's lifetime. That developmental process is being influenced by the environment. So what you're going to see when I start up the videos here is development is now going to change the stiffness of the voxels, so how stiff or how soft they are. So the stiffness of the voxels is going to change slowly over the lifetime of the robot. And that stiffness is going to be changing in response to local pressure. So there's the environmental signal here of pressure, which is going to dictate how the voxels change in stiffness. And how voxels stiffen or soften in response to pressure, that developmental response to the environment is evolved. This is work by Francesco Carucci. You can see I'm just going to pause the video for a moment. You can see that in this case, we're now, again, evolving the 3D structure of the robot. And you can also see that evolution has discovered that these front legs should stiffen. The red indicates stiffening voxels. Let me restart that video. Those front two legs stiffen because there's greater pressure there. And in essence, we get a relatively soft green body and stiff red appendages. Evolution has discovered that in this particular environment, that is a good solution. The fast changing colors that you see now, this is the pressure signal. So you can see the signal that the environment is giving the robot, and evolution has picked up on that signal and used it to change the material properties of the robot. So that's the best robot that we got out of one evolutionary run. And I'm now going to start up the video at the bottom. These are the best robots from two different evolutionary runs, which discovered more or less the same solution. So this is kind of interesting because it says that in this case, there seems to be one common solution that evolution tends to converge on. Okay, so the question then arises, which is, why would we want to add in this additional complexity to the design of robots? It turns out that by adding in this additional developmental mechanism, we can evolve robots more quickly and those robots have a higher fitness than if we only evolved the static body plan. There was no developmental change. So by adding in Devo, we make it easier for evolution to design both the morphology and control of robots for us. So we're improving this automated design process. And finally, what we're discovering now, and this is just recent work, so I don't have a slide demonstrating this. What we found is that this slow developmental change that you see occurring here, this is actually assimilated by evolution. What I mean by that is that evolution discovers how the robot should change over its lifetime, and that change leads to a final form, which you can see here, that works. Two front stiff appendages. And that final form, because it's useful, as evolution continues, it accelerates that developmental change, and it accelerates until eventually, towards the end of evolution, robots are born that already have that particular form. So in essence, the evolutionary process is removing developmental change. The developmental change is helpful at the beginning of evolution to find good robot designs, and then those robot designs become baked in at the end of evolution. That's important for us because, again, we would like to eventually manufacture these soft robots, and we would prefer not to have to simulate this developmental change in the physical machines. We just want to create a robot that has static and fixed material properties. Okay, I see that it's 5 after, so I think I will stop there and I will take any questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Hello, Josh. Hello, Josh.
Okay, we seem to have lost our fearless leader, Fabio.
Oh.
I'm here. Yes.
Are there any questions?
Can you hear me?
Oh, he's back. Okay.
I silenced my microphone, so, and of course I forgot to reactivate it. So please, I think there is a question from Moscow, yes? Right?
Good.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay.
So Fabio, I apologize, I can't hear you. Is your microphone muted?
No, but...
I'm afraid I still can't hear you.
Moscow, please go ahead with the question.
All right. So Josh, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very interesting. And my question is, there are two ways to evolve a robot, as I have deduced.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm not able to hear you. So I think at this point maybe I'll sign off and wish you good luck with the rest of the course.
Josh.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So may you ask a question again?
All right. So Fabio, I assume that you're going to answer this question, huh?
No, I will try, and then I will forward to Josh. I think he has some problem with the sound because he couldn't hear us.
Okay, yeah, that happens. So my question is, so there are two ways to evolve a robot. First is manually, when an engineer observes a robot and decides which parts to add, which parts to remove, which parts to modify. And there is an automatic way when a robot evolves itself within the simulation, like it changes its structure on its own, according to some algorithm. Which way is more effective? The first one, the manual one, or the automatic one?
Well, of course, I will forward the question to Josh so this is actually the issue with Evo. Why we should use evolution as a design tool. You may remember that I showed that example on the pipe junction from Rauschenberg. So the idea is related to the fact that, let's say, also in engineering, the traditional approach to design is that I suppose to know what I want and in which environment my system will work. Things that I'm designing an airplane engine. In this case, we know what the engine has to do, and we design it to have a given thrust to last some time. And this is okay. Then there are situations where typically, if this machine has to go in the real world, in principle, I don't know in which condition it will happen. So this is particularly true for robotics, because I can, for machines like even a jet engine, I can imagine what I want from that engine. But from a robot, typically I don't know, because think of a robot doing a typical holy grail of assistance robotics, so a housekeeping robot. It has to be able to do the housekeeping in many different apartments. So in this case, using evolutionary approach is a way to surrogate the fact that I don't have a model that I know in advance. So the good thing with evolution is it works with very basic principle. I say to the physical expansion, I want this. And then it tries. It's also faster. So, this is the approach. So it could be that, in particular in soft robotics, we will need to use massively evolutionary approach. I don't know if I answered. I will forward to Josh, but the real issue is that it's a kind of workaround. So I don't know. So I try many. I mimic nature. So actually, we are very complex, and nobody designed us. Well, maybe not, well, this is, I don't want to tell that. Maybe someone set up the environment, but the specifics of the design evolved naturally, so it was kind of random process. But I don't want to, I don't know if this is, but this is an answer to your question, or if you have further.
No, this is a sensible answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know if there are other questions that you want on today's lecture, or that question that you wanted to forward to Josh and to every other lecturer. Please send me, and I will forward. So if there are not any more questions, thank you everybody, and see you next Thursday. Bye everybody. Bye.
Bye, Fabio.
Bye, Fabio. Bye.
Bye.